Alright, let's get this done. Chapter 8. Communication. Expressing and receiving ideas, opinions, and intelligence. Communication is simply an exchange of information. Adequate communication skills are ideal for one to bear as we yearn for achievement. There are two forms of communication: verbal and nonverbal. Attached to those are several unique systems and devices in which are utilized to transmit information. Verbal communication consists of spoken word or sound emitted using one's voice. Systems used to express verbal communication are languages and familiar sounds. The primary device employed to forward verbal communication is the mouth. This is where the initial vibrations from the voice box portal. There are also other popular devices that serve as microphones to transfer words and sounds within an earshot of the receiver, such as telephones and two-way radios. Systems used to communicate non-verbally are symbols, sounds, and gestures. Symbols include written word and pictures. Devices used to embody these images could be anything from utensils used for marking to the surfaces in which they lie. This form of communication can also be produced on electronic technology devices, i.e., text messaging and Photoshop. Sound is spawned from anything that creates an auditory impression. Some devices used to generate sound could be manual operated instruments, electronic gadgets, natural resources, and body parts, just to name a few. Gestures, or in other words, body language, is just that: the use of motions of the limbs or body as a means of communication. Communication is a two-part process. It requires one party to express information as the second party receives the information. Verbally or non-verbally, one must wholly understand the content of the message for it to be considered proper communication. If there are ever any barriers obstructing the receiver's comprehension of what is being expressed, no true communication is established. Minor complications can cause major miscommunications. Although speaking is one of the oldest and most common ways to communicate, many times spoken words are unnecessary for successful communication. Nonverbal communication can often create higher volumes to the receiver than nonverbal communication. Every day, businessmen and women alike initiate and finalize administrative deals entirely through written documents while never once speaking verbally to one another. In other cases, perhaps there was a type of language barrier in the way of an understanding between the expressor and receiver. In that situation, common symbols, sounds, or gestures may be the best option in efforts of achieving communication amongst the two parties. Or how about when our mother gives us that piercing glare, better known as the eye, that we all know too well? When we see that, there is no verbiage needed. The message is clear. Whatever it is that we are doing needs to stop. Referring to the popular phrase, actions speak louder than words, if I was in a conflicting confrontation with another person and verbally stated that I no longer wish to engage in the altercation while calmly walking away from the situation, most likely the opposing person would agree to set our differences aside, establish this as middle ground, and to walk away from the situation. However, if in the same exact scenario and I verbally stated the conflict was no longer an issue, but then proceeded to physically rush the person or present any other threatening body language in which could be perceived as harmful, my verbal statement of a truce becomes invalid as the second party will have the right to react to my actions rather than my words. Words don't mean a thing without actions behind pushing them forth. Words are potential, action is fact. Nonverbal body language can also reflect one's emotional state or mood. Personally, I can tend to be an emotional person, and in the past, there have been occasions where my nonverbals have sent a more accurate message than my verbals have. If I was having a bad day, my verbal and nonverbal communication would contradict one another. I would verbalize that my feelings were stable, while in actuality, I was internally stifled. To avoid voicing my true feelings, I would verbally insist that everything was all good. Even then, others knew from my body language that something was indeed bothering me. In this event, many my nonverbal communication generated higher values than my verbal communication. I associate three P's with communication: projection, purpose, and presentation. Communication can be vastly projected while being expressed through various forms. No matter how we project communication, it is always presented with a purpose. Communication can be bestowed to share feelings, network, educate, navigate, engage in intimate conversation, resolve conflict, originate plans, build relationships, and everything else in between. Oftentimes, it's not what one says, but how one says it. Presentation exhibits the sincerity or severity of the message at hand. Also solidifies, I'm going to just do that whole little paragraph over. I associate three P's with communication: projection, purpose, and presentation. Communication can be vastly projected while being expressed through various forms. No matter how we project communication, it is always presented with a purpose. Communication can be bestowed to share feelings, network, educate, navigate, engage in intimate conversation, resolve conflict, originate plans, build relationships, and everything else in between. The most critical aspect to communication is presentation. Oftentimes, it's not what one says, but how one says it. Presentation exhibits the sincerity or severity of the message at hand and also solidifies the difference between one being aggressive versus being assertive. Among the wide array of purposes that call for the convention of proper communication, I found that my relationships benefited the most from its application. These relationships were both interpersonal and intrapersonal. Communication skills were useful as I was getting to know and understand who I was on the inside, as well as embarking upon business. It's so damn dry. My apologies. Among the wide array of purposes that call for the convention of proper communication, I found that my relationships benefited the most from its application. These relationships were both intrapersonal. Come on. These relationships were both interpersonal and intrapersonal. Communication skills were useful as I was getting to know and understand who I was on the inside, as well as embarking upon business relationships amongst clients, customers, partners, and contributors, to more personal relationships involving my family, friends, and mentees. Each type of relationship demands well established communication for it to prosper. With no communication, there is no relationship. Learning about myself internally was a colossal challenge for me in the early stages. I didn't carry with me any reasoning, nor did I care to. I was living by the second and dying by the minute. Learning about myself internally was a colossal challenge for me in the early stages. I didn't carry with me any reasoning, nor did I care to. I was living by the second and dying by the minute. As opposed to thinking irrationally and acting impulsively, I began to stop and self reflect. One of the best ways to learn is through asking questions. I consciously questioned my subconscious as to what administered my feelings and why I was doing the things I did. I expressed to myself desires and goals which lay in the forefronts of my sights, and then identified all that could hinder these plans. I reiterated I reiterated what was important to me in my life, and I made a decision to what it is I would stand for as a member of society. To receive these answers, I had to communicate within. By knowing and understanding myself outright through my own interpersonal relationship allows me to better prepare for, react to, and transcend over any obstacles I may be faced with. I convey these same skills as I approach and take on business relationships. I ask questions, express the intentions and goals of the company's product or service, and relay the direction in which I aim to lead the client, customer, and partner into. By communicating these things and being honest while doing so, consolidates rapport between the other party. Okay. By communicating these things and being honest while doing so, consolidates rapport between the other party and I. Rapport is a harmonious accord that subsumes understanding and trust. All my life, I have been a salesman. Since a mere tot selling candy bars for the school's fundraiser, to operating my first lemonade stand, to my dark years where I mastered the concept of supply and demand as I purchased illegal drugs, wholesale, and distributed them retail unto my peers, while at the same time managing a stable of female escorts, to my more respectable days in business, to where I worked as a top ranked sales associate for a major corporation before incorporating my own company. Now everything I do is legit. Truthfully, I'm tired of going to jail. I can't make no money trapped inside of a box. The way I succeed as a salient salesman within any industry within any industry holds one common factor: communication. One can never become successful without the cooperation of others. Nothing can be sold without a buyer, and nobody is going to buy without a level of understanding and trust. Regardless what I was selling, I had to always communicate my ideas, opinions, and intelligence to the buyer or receiver in order to establish rapport and obtain cooperation to achieve success. As I sold candy bars, I made sure to communicate the cause, purpose, and goals of the fundraiser. During the lemonade stand, I communicated the different sizes and prices of the product by displaying the options on a menu board. Within my drug enterprise, I expressed and highlighted the quality and effects of the goods that I had to offer. While managing female escorts, I communicated to them the value I brought to the table and shared the vision I held to take us to the top. Working as a professional sales rep, I would pinpoint all financial and convenience benefits that the company's product and or service would bring to the customer. Since after launching my own company, I continue to exude communication to further progress and success. This includes everything from distinctively illustrate, illustrating intellectual property claims, networking with industry professionals, advertising and marketing direct towards the consumer, hiring and training employees, to securing investments and landing upper echelon deals with clients and partners. Business relationships rely on all forms and systems of communication to endure. How else would I have been able to raise funds for a good cause, retain clientele while selling drugs alongside hundreds of competitors throughout the city, persuade women not only to sell their body, but to give me the money after doing so? Or how would I have been able to become a top sales associate for a corporate company and receive the cooperation from others to grow my own? If I didn't constitute appropriate communication skills, none of this would have been attainable. Furthermore, I implicated communication as a vital tool throughout the course of my interpersonal skills. Sorry. Furthermore, I implicated communication as a vital tool throughout the courses of my interpersonal relationships. I have noted that I am open and assertive as I communicate with my social counterparts. The relationship itself. Okay. I have noted that when I am open and assertive as a, as I communicate with my social counterparts, the relationship itself heightens. Whereas when I repress my thoughts and feelings while being passive, the relationship dwindles. The more I isolate myself and allow unreleased emotions to ferment and frolic around my mind, the more I tend to come off aggressive when I do express these emotions. Communicating aggressively is conducive to bad relationships and can ultimately regulate a relationship totally and can ultimately relegate a relationship totally. Yeah, sometimes I just read a little fast, but it's good practice though. Personal relationships use communication to institute intimacy. Intimacy is broader than which one may assume and is associated with more than just romance. There are several definitions of the word. In this context, intimacy is a mutual connection in its deepest nature where all parties are on the same page, sharing the same intended purpose. Personal relationships are strong at this level of communication. Once I transition to a more personal relationship with another, whether it is an amicable friendship or a devotion of love, I believe we should be comfortable enough to communicate anything to one another. As a boyfriend and father, I continuously communicate to my family how much I love them and will do anything for them. I speak to them both per my words and my actions. My children and I have developed an unconditional, intimate bond as a result of communication. As I was incarcerated and physically away from my young family, all we had was communication. If we weren't talking on the phone, we were writing letters and sending cards, anything to keep in touch. Though I wasn't there to join my kids in activities such as running around the park or exploring the state zoo, they knew that daddy loved them. When I wasn't there to lay up with my woman on those cold, lonely nights when she yearned for my physical touch, she knew I she knew I was yearning for her touch as well. Communication like there was no chance. Now that I'm back home, Now that I'm back home, it's not uncommon for my girl and I to have our occasional differences from time to time. But what relationship doesn't? And if and when there is an issue in our relationship, we each discuss our stand on the matter openly and honestly and attempt to resolve the conflict civilly. Now, we all know some situations don't always have a fairy tale ending. I spent many nights in the doghouse because of my unjustifiable behaviors and comments. As a friend, I assertively express my boundaries and openly communicate my opinions because a real friend tells the other what they need to hear rather than what they want to hear. When I see a friend making condescending life choices, I'm eager to share my perspective because I know one can't see the defects and flaws in themselves the way one on the outside looking in can. So if you're so if you're so so if you're one of my pals and you're making poor decisions, I'm going to tell you straight up, not to hurt you, but to help you. And I would expect for you to do the same for me. As a mentor, I communicate to each mentee the empathy I have for their situation and the desire I encompass to see them succeed. Most of those I have come across and worked with have gone through some catastrophic tribulations, which commenced their trust issues and deprived them of adamant guidance. In my sessions, I put my whole self out there as I tell my story to show that I relate to their hardship. Through further conversation, trust begins to emulate, and the mentees agree to follow my guidance. I stay in constant contact with each mentee to reaffirm to them that we are on the same page and that I will do anything with the purpose to see them succeed. Find one, guide one. That's the motto. Communication has been around and will be around forever. With it, information is projected in several forms via many systems and devices. It is better to express than to repress. So if you got it on your mind, get it off your chest. Think of the three P's. And remember, presentation is everything. Communication, communicating the right information can endorse one in getting out of a tight squeeze, just as the wrong tidings can advocate for putting one inside of a jam. The purpose of communication is unexclusive as it is unlimited. Take advantage of perfecting the art of communication as you will find it to be one of the greatest tools on earth. So, chapter 9 of 16 of 15. Chapter 9, integrity, adhering to a code of honor. Integrity is an unimpaired conditional state of being complete and undivided, especially as it pertains to ethical morals and values. Integrity is what a leader is made of. It entails honor, respect, loyalty, trust, tolerance, compassion, honesty, courage, and unity. Having integrity adheres to doing what's righteous, even as no one is looking. One's character is structured based off the value of their integrity, the volume of their integrity. When measuring integrity, it's either you have it or you don't. Granted, mistakes will be made, and if so, the honorable thing to do is communicate the truth and take responsibility by holding yourself accountable. Nobody likes a liar. Keeping it real is appeasing and admirable to one's to both oneself and in the eyes of others. Nobody likes a liar. Keeping it real is appeasing and admirable to both oneself and in the eyes of others, i.e., refutably achieve more pleasurable satisfaction in life when I am upfront and honest about my issues and concerns from the jump, as opposed to lying about or concealing information for it only to be discovered later down the road. Hiding something from someone is just as bad as lying to them, because in the end, the truth will always come to the light. In any event, lying will only worsen the situation. Beyond materialistic items, all we have in this world is our word and reputation. It's more respectable and courageous to confess the truth early on and deflect the guilt than to later be exposed as a liar and be faced with the shame. Life is 20% what happens and 80% how one responds. I'd rather be known as a person who made a bad decision and took accountability for it than to be a person who lied and refused to admit it. My grandma told me there is nothing she can't withstand more intensively than to be lied to. She said if you make a promise, keep it. If you agree to a deal, stand on your end. And if asked a question, answer honestly. Aside from upholding the truth and retaining accountability, keeping it real to the authenticity of your character and personality under any circumstance is another pillar of integrity. One should never have to falsify their identity. Integrity is the ability to tolerate interference and remain resilient as you stay true to who you are as a person. Be you, not what others want you to be. Not everyone is going to like you. And so what? Who cares if they don't? That's their loss. Pretending to be someone or something you're not leaves only a matter of time before you're exposed as the fraud you are. Holding the title of being fake is a monster. Holding the title of being fake is a monstrously despicable reputation to haul. Being real and having integrity is the engine to magnetism. No one wants to associate with an imposter. Representing yourself authentically on a consistent basis will draw in a more extensive following than to not. It comes down to trust. At the end of the day, people want to know the ones they associate themselves with are trustworthy. They, the way I see it is, if one doesn't care enough to keep it real within their own situation and to whom they are as a person, then how can I trust them to keep it real with me? Confirmed loyalty unifies separate entities to maneuver side by side. Integrity isn't a skill, it's a lifestyle, and with it we can't lose. Wherever I am, whoever I'm around, I am and forever will be me. I call it like I see it. If I say it, then I mean it. Others can love it or hate it, take it or leave it. Everything I'm not, maybe everything I am. A quote by Kanye West. Of all the diverse environments I have been positioned in, not once did I hold back nor substitute my true self. Yes, I made mistakes, but those don't define me. What I do after making the mistake is what counts. When I was employed for a top notch corporate company, I wasn't in the office acting all corny trying to fit in. Instead, I brought a whole new dynamic to the office by being myself and relentlessly expressing my open personality. The magnetism I constructed urged others to loosen up more and do the same. While through it all, my network system and pay grade skyrocketed. Back on the block, I didn't make any claims towards being some big and bad gang banging kingpin because to keep it real, I wasn't. Actually, I never even been in a gang. Although I did more dirt than a little bit, I was just a hustler with the heart to put it all on the line for the dollar bill. What got me reverence in the streets wasn't a set, a rank, or an amount of cash. It was the fact that I was real and nothing or no one could change it. Even in the concrete jungle, I have always been trustworthy, courageous, and loyal. I could go to any hood on any block and be respected as if I was one of their own. My reputation allowed me to move freely throughout the Twin Cities and do what I loved, making money. To be honest, there was also a time in my life that I acted as if I had absolutely no integrity whatsoever. Even the remnants of those times immerses me into disgust. Throughout the last year or so before I went to prison, I conducted myself like a total scumbag. Blinded by my gambling addiction, I quit a decent paying job to make time for the casino. After losing all my money and ability to pay my rent, I lied to the landlord about why I didn't have the money. In hopes of stalling time out to keep a roof over my head, I told him that I got laid off and was awaiting for my state unemployment application to go through. I played this game for more than 2 months. During this time, I was caught red handed by my girl cheating on her with some random female I took home from a bar. The evidence was right there in my phone, and yet I still chose to lie to her about the entire thing. From there, she cut me smooth off, ignoring all of my phone calls and my pleading text messages. As the holiday season approached, I was presented with the opportunity to see our kids for Christmas. I agreed to a date and time, but when it came, I reneged on my promise. I guess I was too busy doing nothing. My kids were so devastated that I lied to them that it left them in tears. Following this incident, I spent time with my grandfather as he was extremely ill and admitted into the hospital. I called Sarah, the woman I cheated on and the mother of my children, to ask if she could bring the kids to visit my grandfather as his conditions dimmed. She was ambivalent at first. She was ambivalent and bleakly. She was ambivalent. I don't even know that word. How to say it. I know what it means. She was like hesitant, like more than hesitant, like against it. She was ambivalent. And I gotta look that up. That's page 68. I gotta look up how to say that. Ambivalent. Ambivalent. She was ambivalent and bleakly refused. She was ambivalent. I'm gonna say that's gotta be it. She was ambivalent and bleakly refused. Without delay, I spazzed out to the extent that I threatened to kill her. I said, if you don't bring my kids up here to see their grandpa before something happens to him, then I'm going to kill you. This behavior was completely uncharacteristic of me. To protect herself, she went to the sheriff's office and filed for an order for protection. I was oblivious to the order for protection until I was served with the official documents one morning at home. I exploded in frenzy and decided I was going to let this woman know exactly how I felt about it. I called and called, text and text, but got no answer and no reply. My attempt to contact her put me in violation of the order and generated three separate domestic violence arrests. When I found out the police were looking for me, I knew I couldn't go home. So instead of clearing my debts with the landlord, I unyieldingly went on the run. Possessing hardly to any money in my pocket, I scrolled down my phone book and burned the bridges between myself and every contact I could get a hold of. Not one was safe. Even people I did solid business with for years weren't an exception from my manipulation. As the money and drugs streamed in from my devious trickery and strong arm robberies, my drug habits ballooned and my chemical addiction pushed me to behave even further distant outside of my actual self. Living without my integrity intact was like living paralyzed in the realm of darkness. I knew deep in my heart the cycle of my actions were not derived from my true self. I wanted to do right. I wanted to do the right thing, but because of my selfishness, addictions, impulsit, impulsit, impulsivities, 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 impulsivities. I wanted to do right. I wanted to do the right thing, but because of my selfishness, addictions, impulsivities, and as well as other mixed emotions, made such righteousness seem unviable. Bombarding myself with so much at one time was the premise for me degrading my character and taking the easy way out, fecklessly saying, F it. The only way I was going to stop was to be stopped. Subsequent to shackling myself to a gambling addiction, departing from stabilized income, negating my obligations with my landlord, breaking promises to my children, stripping my woman of the decency she deserves, bamboozling unwary associates out of cash and drugs, and drowning myself under a harping chemical addiction. Something finally stopped me in my tracks. Boom! It was that damn brick wall in the middle of the road again. Jail. My run was up, and according to the judge, it was time I be held accountable. Being back in custody after morphing into a character of no integrity was a pivotal juncture for me. I was determined to restore my identity and infuse my integrity to the stature of which it previously stood. Although I was originally picked up on the warrants for violating the order for protection, I also had a fifth degree drug possession pending in another county and been ducking my appointed probation officer from my initial aggravated robbery case for months. It was imperative to me that the only option I had to squash these legal burdens off my back and redeem my true sense of self was to man up and confess to what was on my heart. Standing before the judge, I pled guilty to the three domestic violence charges for attempting to contact my kid's mother after already threatening her life. And for the record, I had no actual credence to follow through with these threats. Nevertheless, I was 100% wrong for what I did. I am sincerely apologetic. Exiting the courtroom, my probation officer caught up to me and informed me that he was going to recommend additional time to my sentence for violating probation by not staying in contact with him for the past few months. I told him straight up that I would be more interested in purely executing the remainder of my 57-month stay sentence. A week later, I was en route to do my first prison bid. Two pending cases down, one to go. About 3 months or so into my prison stint, I was transported on a writ to handle my last pending case. I went into the court with my head held high, took responsibility for possessing a controlled substance, and walked out dignified. Fortunately, my sentence was run concurrent with the first two cases, so with all the T's crossed and I's dotted, my legal affairs were sufficiently under wraps. Patiently waiting for my sentence to expire, I directed my efforts towards making amends and providing closure to those I mistreated. Apology. This is an apology to all the people I robbed. I also want to say thank you to those that didn't call the cops. I'm writing this to inform you all that I'm caught and off the block. I got 57 months to do and deserve every day that I got. I can't remember every stain. Damn sure can't think of every name. Truthfully, I feel ashamed with no one but myself to blame. I told myself I had to do it. Get in, get out, keep it moving. I wanted to win because I was losing. Now I'm here to face the music. I'm saying sorry from the heart. I will not rob again. I pray to God every night to forgive me for my sin. A poem by Michael Comer. Though I didn't get as far as personally apologizing to each individual street associate that I swindled out of money and drugs, I did, however, communicate with my old landlord and the mother of my children. I started by writing a ravishing letter to my landlord, explicating to him exactly why I vanished without notice and also fessed up to the real reason why my overdue rent payments. I then petitioned for his sympathy as I expressed how deeply remorseful I was for misrepresenting myself and requested that he grant me the liberty to pay what I owe to revitalize the situation and rebuild our mutual understanding. Writing this letter was keenly rejuvenating. With every word I inscribed came with an eternal feeling, as if fragments of my true character were being recouped. I like to believe my sincere wordage made a lasting impression on Mr. Williams, because less than a month later he responded to my letter by sending one of his own. In his reply, he accepted my apologies and told me not to worry about the money I owed him. He then went on to share some words of wisdom with me and commended me on the amount of integrity I hosted by submitting such a genuinely heartfelt note. Most astonishing, enclosed in the envelope, was a money order made out in my name to be deposited into my inmate account. This gesture made by Mr. Williams was a testament of his character and level of integrity. It also proves that it is never too late to rehabilitate our true self and make things right amongst those we've treated wrong. Shortly after the impeccable reception and feedback from Mr. Williams, I worked up enough courage to reach out by way of a third party to the woman I regretfully mistreated the most, the mother of my children, Sarah. I was astounded yet again. My message was returned, instructing me to call her. I felt an extensive internal surge as my body froze in a shock of disbelief. Nonetheless, I was inarguably the happiest man in the world at that moment. This was my chance to take full accountability for my preposterous behaviors with the purpose to reform my integrity and rectify the relationship that I single handedly eradicated. In the wake of procrastinating for a few hours, I set my I set my nerves aside and dialed the number to the woman who deserves to hear the truth. The phone rang. She answered, and before she could say another word, I adamantly apologized, owning up to the woman in my phone and admitting there to be no logic for my disrespect. I pled with Sarah not to measure my character based off my mistakes, for its actual content is much greater. Emotion poured out from my heart, freeing my soul of its toxic components and progressively reinstating my integrity. I propose that we salvage our relationship and renew our family while guaranteeing her and our children a better me in return. It took a lot of chipping away. However, Sarah eventually put faith in my word, dismissed my rash history, and permitted me another chance to proclaim my love and commitment to her and our young children. I was lifted with joy and couldn't have asked for anything more. The ripple effect from my behavior spread wide, and the only way to ameliorate the damage was to delve in head first and put in the work. As much as I wished I could reverse time and recant my statements, what I did could not be overturned, and the only considerable alternative I had was to unveil my true colors. Dramatically enough, after my passionate expiation, Sarah and I pronounced to get back together. I vowed to uphold the infinite opulence of integrity. I made certain that I would rather jump in a bottomless pit full of flesh-eating piranhas than to go back on my word and break this promise. Every day that goes by, I impel to be the righteous person that my grandparents raised me to be. In essence, adhering to a code of honor is virtually the only conventional passage towards magnetism, leadership, and healthy success. Rhetorically speaking, isn't success what we all hanker for in the first place? Chapter 10. Education. Mentally developed knowledge. Education is the process of developing knowledge to one's full mental capacity implemented by way of facts, instructions, and guidance. Education is knowledge. Knowledge is power. However, this power is merely harnessed. The choices we make with such knowledge will actually declare the overall eminence. Knowledge alone cannot replace wisdom. Wisdom is the accumulation of every facet of education, a been there, done that type of thing. All the knowledge in the world doesn't amount to experience. Some of life's best lessons can't be taught, they can only be learned. One needs more than book smarts. We also need street smarts and common sense in order to ignite empowering decisions. This illuminates why oftentimes, in addition to their textbook studies, college students are required to complete a series of hours in the field as an intern to meet the criteria for selective courses. We have to learn before we can teach. A knowledgeable person might not know all the answers, but will know how and where to find them, while in the process deeming a further distension of their own education. Education, education, education intricately, in, intric, intricately, intricately. Education intricately transitions into maturity. Education intricately transitions into maturity, and it also gives us the innate ability to go after what we want in life. We can't purchase a home without first learning where there is one for sale. Education is more than harboring facts. It is surging the aptitude to solve any debatable uncertainty or equation. We don't need to instinctively know the answer. We need to be educated enough to do the research. Even a genius asks questions. It is unlikely for one person to know everything about everything. Education is dispersed in two primitive tiers. The first being generalized education, underlying fundamentals, knowing just enough about a lot of stuff. And the second would be specialized education, which is advanced intelligence, knowing detailed insight on a subject. A sports analyst has an abundance of generalized knowledge in the sundry of sports, but is specifically educated in the specific sport or sports in which they analyze. As an analyst, one must be educated if they intend on educating. There is no boundary for how much specialized knowledge one can annex. It is up to us the sum of knowledge we choose to develop through education. The sweepingly intelligent way to acquire knowledge is empirically. I learned a lot along the course of my young life. Pass or fail, everyone's every one of life's tests I came up against was fused with a lesson, and each lesson compensated me with the tandem of wisdom and maturity. I learned that to fail is not to be defeated. Failure is a pathway to attainment. The things I failed at never defeated me. They were only minor setbacks, which taught me not that it can't be done, but that it has to be done differently. The most elusive problem our youth and at-risk youth adults from underprivileged communities stumble upon is the unforeseen education in anything different. School teachers educate us with book knowledge, but what about the in the field experience? In that sense, it seems as if the teacher of life is life itself. Beginning from an early age, many, including myself, has been educated by the unprecedented upside of negative and unhealthy behaviors while undermining the prolific downside of the consequences these behaviors may cause. Sadly, while in the field of life, it is more practical that we will be taught to sell drugs, rob, and gamble before we are taught to make an honest living. This is where our pestilent behaviors and thoughts inaugurate. Perhaps if we knew better, we'd do better. Freshly roaming uncharted territories with a lackluster surplus of wisdom almost always sanctions as a debacle waiting to have to fall to get up. We may enter a field with minimal general knowledge and through education, trial, and errors, garner specialized knowledge in the category in which before we had the slightest of education. The cohesion of empirical data like education and experience descends into wisdom and maturity. Wisdom and maturity gives us the prudence we need to banish obstinate impressions and become enlightened to the reality of knowing that everything that glitters isn't gold. As I matured through non as I matured through non-success and hardship, my common sense tells me the more I bump my head, the less appetizing it is to do. Hearing people glorify activities that brandish poor results indicates to me that they are more likely have never actually did what it is they are extolling. If they if they did do it, then they haven't done it enough to want to stop, or they just haven't or they just have no desires to do better. Why take instructions from a novice? You don't hear people who struggle to survive while living off ramen noodles and bologna sandwiches boast about how delightful hard times are. Nuh-uh. 99.99% of the time, the people who have been impeded under these circumstances have poignantly vied for a passage out of the situation. Even the poorest of the poor can have visions of empowerment. It starts with education. We have to educate ourselves to be a prudent pioneer, leave the nonsense where it lays, and not to settle for anything less than great. Education is to be passed forward from neighbor to neighbor, generation to generation. Be attentive to the words, decisions, and actions of those around you. for everyone has a lesson to share. Observe those from a distance who rambunctiously praise the fast life time and time again. The lessons they teach is the epitome of what not to do. I've been there, done that, and each lesson I took in was learned the hard way. Yours doesn't have to be. Let the mishaps of others, like those of mine, guide you in the right direction. I present you this knowledge to mentally empower you to ornate your education, to ornate your educated decision making skills. The world needs more positive leaders and role models. We all have the power and education, and with wait, we all have the power, and with education added to the formula, we become impervious in the face of failure and defeat. Education is the itinerary to your dreams. Chapter 11, Employment. We're going to double back on this one. Now it's only like 4 chapters left. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. It's like 5 chapters left. Yeah, we're going to take a break there, man. We was working. Like I said, we're getting this content in real quick. We're going to use this, chop it up, probably get some more videos up out of me. But like I said, this is good practice. The next step from here is the audio book. We're going to put that on iTunes, Spotify, um, Amazon, whatever your platform want to be. We got what we got. Whatever your platform want to be, we're going to put it so you can see. That's it. If it rhymes, it's divine. I like to rhyme all the time. So don't pay me no mind.